Good morning, good morning, good morning. Your Excellency, the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, Your Excellencies, the ministers here present, Your Excellency, the Speaker of Parliament, Ms. Baleka Mbete. In our presence, we have the United Nations Resident Coordinator, who is my boss. She's quite short, but she's very powerful. Dr. Nados Bekele Thomas, and other heads of the United Nations who are present, the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, Ben Mpoko, who's here present, ambassadors from Netherlands, ambassadors from Sweden, ambassadors, I think, from other countries. I'm not quite sure who else is in the room. I also want to just acknowledge the women who are here in this room who have really been at the forefront of making this journey possible. I want to thank you for giving me the honor of having to moderate what is not an easy panel, but a very critical panel. Because as we learned from about 18 months ago, across the world, if it wasn't for women coming out in the Me Too movement, there would not have been an acknowledgement, even in the film industry, in the workplaces across the world, including the United Nations workplace, where women have suffered, have endured the scourge of patriarchy in those institutions, as Lebu so profoundly spoke. So I am honored today to lead this conversation. It's a conversation with women who have very bravely endured what we've described. Many of them are very young, and many of them have endured pain and still carry this pain. And so we will do our best to really encourage them as they take this very brave stand to share their story with us and share with us some thoughts about what would be a game changer for this epidemic, this pandemic. We have one of our speakers who is on a wheelchair and has not been able to join us yet. Mandisa Monagali, I would like you to please come up on stage. One of our speakers will be coming in a wheelchair, so if we'll just bear with her when she comes on stage, she will then join us from the ramp. So, I will introduce each one as I ask you to speak, and I would ask you to then come up. If we have a mic, that would make it very, very easy. We have a roaming mic that would make it much easier so everybody doesn't have to stand up, or we won't have enough time. Thank you, Sia. So, I'm going to start with you, Avela. Avela Faye is a beautiful young woman. A woman who, as we sit here this very morning, Avela, by the time we go for lunch, Your Excellency, the President, there will be a woman who will have been murdered by somebody who she thinks loves her. And Avela is going to share with us how this was her story. And so, Avela, share with us the story. For you, this is not just a statistic. This is something that you lived. Tell us briefly what happened, and then share with us one game-changing solution that if, in the presence of the President, His Excellency the President, the Speaker, and all the ministers who are here, all those who could change this game, if there's one thing that they could do, what is that solution that you would suggest? Avela.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Avela Faye, and I was affected by femicide at the age of 14. Approximately 11 years ago, I lost my mother at the hands of my adopted brother. He and a group of friends broke into our home. My 7-month pregnant mother was sleeping in her room with my uncle sleeping in the next room. They broke into the house, first suffocated my uncle to death, And then they proceeded to my mother's room. 1, demanding money, and 2, we later learned they were there for her body part. My mom was ripped open while she was still alive, and the baby was removed from her body. She was later cut to pieces, mutilated, in other words, until there were no limbs. But before the mutilation and the ripping open of the stomach, she was gang raped by my brother and his friend. When they were done, they slit her throat and they slit her throat and they disposed of some of her body parts, but the main ones being the head, the hands, the hearts, were sold for rituals. Till this day, I've never buried my mother. My mother's killer roams free in the streets of South Africa, and the case went cold. Needless to say, my siblings and I were left to fend for ourselves at a very tender age. I won't go into the details of that, but to answer your question on what I think would be a game changer or what could possibly prevent other women or children to go through what my mother and myself and my siblings went through, number 1, this speaks to demand 10 of the 24 demands that were handed over by the total shutdown movement. And it speaks about consistent sentencing and enforcement of existing laws. And I say this because South Africa has become a breeding ground for perpetrators who do not fear the justice system, mainly because the chances of them walking scot-free farly suppress the chances of them being persecuted. And my case is a perfect example of that, because till today, the chances of me running into my mother's perpetrator when I go home, on a scale of 1 to 10, are 10. Secondly, to the traditional leaders, as leaders of our communities, it is your responsibility to take a stand against Muti killings and to ensure that the investigations are prosecutor-led. The time where in Tlaulo or banning people from the villages was a punishment has come and gone. To add to that, referring to demand 21 of the 24 demands handed over by the total shutdown, we need to adopt a policy to make prosecutor-led investigations of gender-based violence against women cases compulsory in order to provide guidance and assist in the gathering of evidence in order to ensure that cases are taken to court, and not only taken to court, but that perpetrators are trialed and ultimately sentenced.
Thank you.
Furthermore, Mr. President, and I'm very glad that I'm sitting here and I can actually look you in the eyes. The 14-year-old Avela, the 18-year-old Avela, and the now 25-year-old Avela, and many other children of South Africa who are often left to fend for themselves as a result of gender-based violence and femicide need closure. We desperately need closure. We desperately need justice.
Thank you, Avela.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you. Thank you, Avela, for that very brave story. I'm going to turn now to see